My name is Natalie. I remember the exact shape of the plate, white ceramic chipped on the edge. It sat in front of me like a mirror, completely empty, reflecting the overhead light and the outline of my small hands folded neatly on my lap. I was 9 years old the first time she said it. "You don't deserve food here." Clara didn't scream it. She said it with the same tone she used when telling my father about the weather or asking Mia about her piano lessons. Calm, measured, final. That night, roast chicken was the centerpiece. Garlic bread, mashed potato salad with tiny cranberries in it. Mia got her usual portion plus seconds. My father was late again on a double shift at the fire station. I sat across from Clara at the long wooden table. She poured herself a glass of wine, never once looking at me. "You didn't earn dinner today, Natalie. You didn't do your chores. You didn't say please. You didn't apologize for spilling water on the floor." I wanted to say I was sorry. I wanted to promise to be better. But I was learning that it wouldn't matter. She had already decided. The plate in front of me would stay empty. Just like my stomach. Just like the space my mother used to fill. My mother had died in a car accident when I was 7. She was soft and warm, and she always cut my toast into triangles. After she was gone, everything changed. My father married Clara within a year. Mia, her daughter, was 2 years older than me and already playing Mozart on the living room piano. Clara was efficient, orderly, beautiful in a cold kind of way. She smelled like eucalyptus and hand sanitizer. In public, she was kind. People called her Selfless, a nurse who volunteered at the community clinic on weekends. She organized food drives, but at home she counted the grapes in the fridge and labeled leftovers with initials. Mine never appeared. That night, I watched Mia eat garlic bread with her fingers. Crumbs fell onto the table. Clara didn't scold her. When dinner was done, Clara stood and cleared the plates. She picked mine up as if it had something on it, though it had never held a single bite. "If you're hungry, Natalie, think about why." She said it like a lesson, like a secret truth she was offering me. I didn't cry. Not that time. I waited until I was in bed, the door closed, the lights off. I pulled the blanket up to my face and let the tears slide silently into my pillow. "You don't deserve food here." I was 9, and I never forgot. Clara met my father at a church fundraiser 6 months after my mother's funeral. He said she was kind, strong, and knew what to do in a crisis. I suppose she did. She handled emergencies like they were puzzles to be solved, not storms to be weathered. My father was a fireman used to chaos smoke and rushing into burning buildings. I think he found her calmness comforting. She was the opposite of everything he lived with at work. Within 8 months, they were married. We moved into her house, a tidy 2-story on a quiet street in a small town in Ohio. Her daughter Mia had a pink room with a white canopy bed and shelves full of trophies from dance competitions. I had a guest room with beige walls and a closet that still smelled like her ex-husband's cologne. Clara called it a fresh start. To me, it felt like being assigned a role in someone else's play. Mia was the star, always performing, always adored. Clara praised her posture, her perfect turns, her discipline. When Mia asked for things, she received them a new leotard, piano lessons, gourmet yogurt with berries on top. When I asked, Clara tilted her head like she was confused by the sound. Sometimes she smiled, but never with her eyes. "Natalie, we can't spoil you. You already get so much attention from your father." At first, I thought I was just adjusting. New house, new rules. I didn't realize how strategic it was. Clara scheduled our meals down to the minute. Breakfast was served at 6:30, lunch at noon, dinner at 6 sharp, but only if you'd earned it. Her criteria were always shifting. One day I missed breakfast because I didn't make my bed properly. Another time, dinner vanished because I hadn't folded the towels evenly. When I protested, she called it structure. When I cried, she said I was sensitive. "You have to toughen up, Natalie. The world isn't going to cater to you." I started hiding crackers under my pillow, but she always found them. She inspected my room like a prison warden. Once, she lined up all the crumbs on my nightstand and took a photo with her phone. "This is manipulation," she said. "Food hoarding is a cry for attention." I remember nodding like I understood. I was 10. At school, I watched other kids open lunchboxes full of sandwiches, juice boxes, cookies. I learned to chew slowly when a friend offered me a piece of string cheese. I never asked for more than a bite. I didn't want to be greedy. Greedy was Clara's favorite word for me. Greedy, disorganized, selfish, words she never used on Mia. With Mia, she used words like graceful, brilliant, exceptional. Even when Mia knocked over a vase or talked back, Clara brushed it off. Teenage hormones, she'd say with a laugh. But if I dropped a fork or spoke too softly, Clara would frown like I'd betrayed some ancient code. I tried to shrink myself. I folded into corners, walked without making noise, and smiled when spoken to. But hunger has a way of swelling inside you. It makes your thoughts loud, your bones sharp, your skin thin. One morning, Clara accused me of taking an extra slice of toast. I hadn't. I said I hadn't. She didn't believe me. She made me sit at the table and watch as Mia ate both our breakfasts. I remember the way the butter glistened on the bread. I remember how Mia looked at me with something between pity and pleasure. I started writing everything down, not in a diary because Clara would have found it. I wrote on napkin school worksheets the backs of piano sheet music Mia discarded. I kept them in a box in the attic crawl space, a place I discovered when Clara asked me to clean the upstairs storage. That box became my witness. Every skipped meal, every insult, every day, she said I was less. She stopped packing me lunch in 6th grade, said I was old enough to manage, but she never bought groceries I could eat. I learned to pretend. I told friends I'd already eaten. I invented stories about fancy dinners and favorite restaurants. No one questioned it. I was thin, yes, but in a town like ours, thin girls were praised. Teachers called me disciplined. The school nurse once complimented my willpower. I smiled and thanked her, wondering if she could hear my stomach growling. When I turned 13, my body refused to bloom. No curves, no cycles, no softness. Clara beamed. "Look at you," she said to my father. "She's so lean, so healthy." My father beamed too. He thought she was taking care of me. He believed her food charts, her portion logs, the fridge magnets labeled with nutrition facts. She framed it as structure, as science, as motherly love. But love doesn't leave a child dizzy on the bus ride home. Love doesn't measure out 6 almonds and call it dinner. When I finally got my first period at 17, it was during a biology exam. I was so shocked I cried in the stall, half out of pain, half out of relief. I had begun to think I was broken, that Clara had starved something out of me that would never return. I applied to college in secret. I chose nutrition not to help people, but to understand what she had done to me, what she had taken. I wanted to learn her language, so one day I could speak it better than she ever did. I was 14 when I fainted for the first time. It happened in gym class right after the mile run. I remember standing near the edge of the track trying to catch my breath when the sky tilted sideways. One second I was upright, the next I was on the ground, the gravel pressing into my cheek, someone yelling my name. At the nurse's office, they gave me orange juice and asked what I'd eaten that day. I lied and said cereal. Clara arrived 20 minutes later, her face tight with concern. She told the nurse I had always been delicate, a low blood sugar issue from birth. She smiled when she said it as if it were a charming quirk. Then she took me home and didn't speak a word until we were inside. "If you ever embarrass me like that again, Natalie, I will make sure you regret it." That was the only warning. After that, I learned how to fall in private. I learned how to sit quickly when the dizziness hit. I memorized the school's water fountain schedule and rationed sips between classes. I kept salt packets in my pencil case and sucked on them to stay alert. When I turned 15, Clara installed a digital food scale in the kitchen. She said it was for family health, but only ever used it on my portions. Each morning, she measured out exactly 28 grams of oats, no milk, no sugar. If I added anything, she noticed. Her eyes scanned everything. If I left a wrapper in the trash, she pulled it out and quizzed me. "Where did you get this? When did you eat it? Who gave it to you?" The fear of being caught became a second hunger. I dreamed of food, but also of being discovered. I imagined someone, anyone, realizing what was happening behind Clara's perfect suburban walls. But no one did. I went to school. I got good grades. I was the quiet girl with the neat binder and the dark circles under her eyes. Mia, on the other hand, became the school's golden girl. She danced. She sang. She hosted sleepovers and wore mascara and ate bagels at lunch without guilt. When her friends came over, Clara made brownies. When mine did, she said we were on a cleanse. Mia once asked why I never had seconds. I shrugged and said I wasn't hungry. She said I was lucky. That kind of luck bruised. I started staying after school more, joining clubs I didn't care about just to avoid going home. I volunteered at the library. I cleaned chalkboards for teachers, anything to delay dinner or the absence of it. But I still had to go home. I still had to face the locked fridge, the numbered shelves, the passive-aggressive notes Clara left about calories and carbs. You should be grateful, Natalie. Most girls your age struggle with their weight. You're lucky I'm keeping you healthy. The day I realized I hadn't grown in 2 years, I cried in the school bathroom. My jeans still fit like they did in middle school. My reflection hadn't changed. I looked like a freeze frame of a child stuck in time. The counselor asked if everything was okay at home. I said yes. I said my stepmother was strict, but she meant well. I said I was just stressed about exams. She nodded and handed me a pamphlet about mindfulness. I threw it away. That winter, Clara caught me eating a granola bar I'd bought with tutoring money. She slapped it out of my hand. "You're addicted to sugar, Natalie. It's disgusting." She made me stand in front of the mirror and recite affirmations. I am disciplined. I am in control. I do not need food. I said them because I had no choice. I said them until the words lost shape. Then I went upstairs and threw up not from the food, but from the shame. By 16, I'd memorized every calorie chart Clara ever showed me. I knew the weight of an apple without a scale. I knew how to breathe shallow to conserve energy. My period vanished again, and this time it didn't come back. At my yearly checkup, the doctor raised an eyebrow at my weight. Clara spoke first. "She's just small-boned, always has been." The doctor accepted it. They always did. Clara wore scrubs and used words like metabolic variance and genetic predisposition. She was the expert. I was just the child. That year I got a job shelving books at the town library. It paid $8 an hour, and I saved every cent. I kept my money in a jar hidden in the vent behind my dresser. With it, I bought protein bars and dried fruit and tiny packs of trail mix. I hid them in my school locker and in the lining of my backpack. I ate in bathroom stalls, chewing slowly, listening for footsteps. I rationed like a soldier in enemy territory. I started keeping a second set of records. The first was Clara's log, the one she made me fill out every night before bed, listing what I'd eaten. The second was mine hidden in code, recording the truth. What I consumed, what I pretended, what she denied me. I was 17 when I realized I'd been starving for 8 years. 8 birthdays, 8 Christmases, 8 Thanksgivings, where I smiled and thanked her for steamed carrots while watching others eat pie. That's when something shifted. I stopped crying. I stopped hoping. I started studying. I applied to the State University's nutrition program. Clara said it was a nice idea, but I probably wouldn't get in. When the acceptance letter came, I didn't show her. I packed my bags in silence. My father hugged me at the door, told me he was proud. Clara nodded, said college would teach me balance. I didn't say goodbye. At school, I ate slowly, nervously. I flinched when people offered to share. It took weeks to stop hiding wrappers. I spent hours in the library reading everything I could about eating disorders, metabolic suppression, childhood malnutrition. I learned how the body shuts down when deprived, how bones stop growing, how hunger becomes a language. Clara had been fluent, but I would become the master. College gave me space. Not just physical space, but silence, the kind that isn't heavy with judgment. I shared a dorm room with a girl named Justine, who always offered me half her granola bar without asking questions. For the first few weeks, I kept saying no. Then one day, I said yes, and it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like a rebellion. I studied harder than anyone else in my cohort. I volunteered in the campus clinic, observing how dietitians spoke to patients, how they framed restriction as care. I listened for Clara's voice in their words. Sometimes I heard echoes. Most days, I just took notes. The more I learned, the more I realized what had happened to me wasn't just cruelty. It had been strategic, calculated. Clara hadn't starved me out of negligence. She did it with spreadsheets and kitchen timers. She called it structure. I called it war. I read about refeeding syndrome and remembered the week I tried to eat normally at 13 and passed out in my bedroom. I read about psychological control and remembered how Clara made me weigh myself before dinner and clapped when the number stayed low. I read about caregiver-induced eating disorders and how they hide in plain sight. I saw my life described in case studies every page like a courtroom transcript, proving I hadn't imagined any of it. I started therapy. My counselor, Dr. Keene, had silver hair and soft eyes. He asked about my childhood and didn't flinch when I told him Clara used to check my trash for evidence of secret snacking. He called it coercive control. He said the damage would take years to undo. I said I didn't want to undo it. I wanted to understand it. He asked why. I said, because I'm going back. He tilted his head, curious. I said not now, but one day. In my 3rd year, I specialized in diabetes and cardiovascular health. I learned how to write meal plans that balanced blood sugar and minimized sodium. I interned at a clinic where half the patients looked like Clara women who smiled at nurses and lied on food logs. I studied their habits. I listened to the patterns. I began to think like her, only better. Smarter. My professor said I was talented. I accepted the praise, but inside I was sharpening something. A tool. A plan. Then came the phone call. My father's voice on the line, shaky, older than I remembered. He said Clara had been diagnosed with early-stage heart failure. She needed someone to help manage her nutrition, someone trustworthy, someone family. I almost laughed. He asked if I could come home for a while just until she stabilized. He said he trusted me, said I knew more than any nurse they could hire. I told him I'd think about it. I already knew I would go. I packed my medical bag the next morning. Glucometer meal log templates, food scale, digital charting software, low-sodium recipe guides. I printed out a blank power of attorney form and slipped it into the folder. Clara didn't know it yet, but I was coming home. Not as a child, not as a victim, as her caregiver. The first time I saw her again, she looked smaller, not just in frame, but in presence. Her skin sagged slightly around her jaw. Her hair, once thick and controlled, frayed at the edges. She opened the door with a smile, thin and rehearsed. "Natalie," she said, what a surprise. She hugged me like we hadn't shared a battlefield. I hugged her back. My father appeared from the garage dragging a suitcase. "Business trip," he said. "Out of state for 2 weeks." He seemed relieved to see me. Said he was glad Clara would be in good hands. I nodded, gave him a professional smile. "You don't have to worry, Dad. I'll take excellent care of her." Clara's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee. I noticed the mug was smaller than I remembered. Minimalist. No slogan, just white ceramic. I said we should begin her intake assessment immediately. She said she felt fine. I told her patients with chronic heart conditions often believe they're stable until it's too late. She didn't argue. She followed me to the kitchen where I cataloged every item in her pantry, photographed each prescription bottle, and labeled the shelves. I said it was for consistency. She said nothing. That night I made dinner. Grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, no salt. I weighed each ingredient, measured the portions. I served her a plate and watched her face as she examined it. No complaints, just a quiet nod. After dinner, I handed her the new food journal. She looked at it, then at me. "I've kept these before," she said. I smiled. "I know. That's why I'm sure you'll be excellent at it." She didn't know I had scanned every page of her old journals, the ones where she had recorded my weight down to the ounce, the ones where she had circled numbers and written notes like "too slow to chew" and "denied dessert, disrespectful at lunch." I kept them in a digital archive, highlighted and categorized. Evidence. Clara's first week on the plan was smooth. She followed instructions, took her medication, drank the assigned fluids. I sent daily updates to my father full of charts and cheerful summaries. She's responding well. Her compliance is excellent. It was the same language she once used to describe me in school reports. Now it was hers. I began to monitor her closely. Not just food, but patterns. When she got tired, when she complained, when she tried to skip journaling. I logged it all. I was thorough. Clara had taught me well, and I had learned everything. By the 2nd week, Clara began showing signs of resistance. Subtle at first. She'd leave food uneaten, complain of blandness, request condiments we both knew were off limits. I reminded her of the dietary goals: sodium reduction, saturated fat control, glycemic balance. I spoke in terms she used to use on me. "This isn't punishment, Clara. This is prevention." She nodded, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. The same flicker I used to have when she lectured me about gratitude while denying me a sandwich. I adjusted the meal plan slightly. Cut 50 calories here, reduced portion sizes by 20 grams there. Not enough to alarm, just enough to tighten the grip. Clara started getting headaches. She told Mia during a phone call that she felt tired all the time. Mia texted me to ask if everything was okay. I sent a photo of Clara's dinner, neatly plated full of vegetables and lean protein. She's just adjusting to lower sugar intake, I said. Detox symptoms are normal. Mia didn't question it. Why would she? I was the expert now. Clara began trying to cheat. I found a half-eaten granola bar under the couch cushion. She claimed it was Mia's. Mia hadn't visited in 3 days. I documented the incident in the log, noted it as a relapse in behavioral compliance. Then I locked the pantry and installed a motion sensor on the fridge, for her safety. She asked if that was necessary. I said yes. I remembered how she once threatened to install a lock on the cabinet when she caught me eating toast at midnight. I remembered how scared I was. Now she was the one asking permission to snack. Her weight began to drop. Not drastically, just enough to be noticeable. She blamed stress. I told her we were finally seeing results. Look how far you've come, Clara. Your discipline is admirable. She smiled tightly. The cracks were starting to show. She tried calling my father one evening. I intercepted the call. He's in a meeting, I said. International project. Long hours. She looked defeated. I offered her tea. No sugar, no honey. She drank it in silence. I began implementing more structured check-ins, morning weigh-ins, mood tracking, energy level logs. Everything recorded, time-stamped, signed. She complied, probably because she knew what non-compliance had meant in our house. My house now. One afternoon, I found a bag of mini chocolate bars hidden in the laundry room. Classic behavior, I noted. Secrecy, shame, compulsion. I showed the photos to Mia. She was concerned but not surprised. I told her it was typical for patients to resist dietary interventions. It's emotional. Clara always had a complicated relationship with food. Mia remembered how Clara had controlled her recital snacks. She agreed it was probably best to maintain strict oversight. Clara's world was shrinking, and she knew it. Every attempt to assert herself was quietly countered. When she tried to adjust her own breakfast portion, I reset the kitchen scale. When she skipped a meal log entry, I reminded her of the importance of data integrity. When she complained of fatigue, I scheduled a checkup and reported her complaints as nonspecific. The doctor praised my diligence. "Your daughter-in-law is very invested in your health," he said kindly. Clara didn't respond. She looked out the window like a prisoner counting the spaces between clouds. I kept the meals unseasoned, salt-free, oil-free, life-free. I knew what it did to a person that kind of eating, how it dulled the senses, slowed the mind. I knew because I had lived it. Clara started forgetting things, appointments, words. I noted it as cognitive fog, common in patients undergoing dietary restructuring. I kept careful logs. On her worst day, she told me she was too weak to get out of bed. I checked her vitals, noted a drop in blood pressure, and adjusted her intake down by another 100 calories. Body adapting to caloric efficiency, I wrote. I remembered her telling me once that hunger was the body learning to function more efficiently. I thought of that often. She became quieter, more compliant. She smiled less. She watched me move through the house like a ghost might watch a former life. At night, I sat in her old armchair and reread her journals. I marked the entries where she praised herself for disciplining Natalie's appetite and limiting Natalie's sugar impulses. I recorded those quotes into her treatment file, labeled them as evidence of historical context. She began to look at me differently, not with contempt, not with fear, with recognition. She knew what I was doing. She just didn't know how to stop it. That was the brilliance of it. She had trained me to obey structure, and now I was the structure. She had made rules, and I had memorized every one. Then I improved them. She had been imprecise, emotional. I was clinical, detached, surgical. One night she asked if we could have a normal dinner. Just once. Pasta, maybe. I said pasta was inflammatory. I said her heart couldn't handle it. I said no. She nodded. I left her alone at the table with her measured plate of boiled vegetables. I went upstairs and opened the file I'd been building. Clara Patient 001. Case Study in Mirrored Control. I wrote clinical notes about her reactions, her regression, her nutritional deficiencies. I used the same language she'd once used on me. Observed low emotional regulation. Demonstrates aversion to compliance. I wasn't documenting her recovery. I was documenting her unraveling. Each chart, each photo, each log entry was a brick in a wall I was building around her. She had built one around me. Now it was her turn to live inside the silence. The medical board would never question it. My credentials were spotless. My notes were impeccable. The numbers matched. The symptoms aligned. I knew how to describe starvation without using the word. I knew how to justify cruelty with charts and citations. Clara had taught me well. When I lowered her dinner calories again, she didn't argue. She just sat there pushing a piece of steamed zucchini around her plate. I watched her and wondered if she remembered all the times I'd done the same. Probably. Hunger leaves a memory deeper than pain. It becomes part of your bones. She said she wasn't sleeping well. I noted sleep disturbance. I offered chamomile tea and white noise. She said she was cold all the time. I suggested more layers. Her blood work started showing signs of nutrient deficiency. I adjusted her supplements but not her meals. Too much change at once could disrupt progress, I explained. She nodded. I began narrating every step of her care like a teacher. I told her what I was doing, why it was necessary, how it would help. She nodded always. But her eyes followed me like she was watching something she used to own being remade. One morning she said, "You're turning into me." I smiled. I said no. I'm turning into something better. Then I served her breakfast, 2 egg whites, 1 slice of dry toast, and a smile. Clara started hiding food again. I found a box of crackers behind the water heater and 2 packets of sugar tucked into her cardigan drawer. She denied putting them there. I held them up in front of her face and asked calmly if she remembered the time I hid a granola bar in my school locker. She looked away. I said hiding food was a symptom of emotional dependency and that it needed to be treated seriously. She said nothing. I logged the behavior and reduced her snacks for the week. When Mia visited, Clara put on her best smile. She sat straighter, wore lipstick, tried to laugh at old jokes. Mia brought flowers and organic tea. I served dinner on matching plates, hers full, and Clara's carefully portioned. Mia noticed. She asked if her mom was eating enough. I opened the binder and showed her the charts. Caloric tracking, sodium logs, weight progress. I used the word metabolic equilibrium. I used the phrase medically supervised. Mia nodded. Clara picked at her food without speaking. Later that night, I found her staring at the pantry lock. She didn't try to open it. She just stood there, eyes glazed, hand hovering like she was remembering a time when she was the one turning the key. I said softly that the lock was for her safety. She asked, "Is this really about safety?" I asked, "Did it feel like safety when you did it to me?" She didn't answer. I began timing her meals, 20 minutes per sitting. If she ate too slowly, I reminded her that digestion required rhythm. If she ate too quickly, I suggested she was binging. I adjusted her portions based on compliance. I told her food was earned just like she used to tell me. When she cried, I documented emotional lability. I noted that hunger could cause mood swings and that interventions were necessary. When she begged, I reminded her that recovery was painful but necessary. One morning, she refused breakfast. I marked it as non-compliance and called her primary physician. I expressed concern about her commitment to treatment. The doctor thanked me for my vigilance. Clara listened from the hallway. Her face was pale. She knew the game. She just wasn't holding the cards anymore. I reorganized the kitchen. Her foods were stored separately, labeled with date time and nutritional content. I removed all seasoning except dried herbs. I replaced her tea with warm lemon water. I told her sugar was toxic to the cardiovascular system. She asked when she could have fruit again. I said when her behavior demonstrated consistency. I began bringing a camera into the kitchen. I told her it was to document her technique. In truth, it was to catch her slipping. One night, I recorded her staring at the refrigerator light. She didn't open it. She just stood there bathed in white, looking like a ghost who had forgotten what warmth felt like. I saved the footage in her file. When my father called, I sent updates, all within clinical language. She's stabilizing. Her metrics are improving. I didn't mention the bruises on her fingers from opening jars that were too tight. I didn't mention the way she flinched when I reached across the table. I didn't mention how she sometimes whispered to herself during meals, reciting the same affirmations she'd once forced me to say. I am in control. I do not need food. I deserve discipline. She said them without realizing it. I let her. I adjusted her plan again, lowered her daily intake to 1,200 calories. I said it was evidence-based. She nodded. I began serving her on smaller plates. Children's plates. She didn't protest. I removed her mirror from the bathroom. She asked why. I said vanity was a distraction. When she tripped going down the stairs, I blamed weakness. When she dropped a glass, I called it motor instability. I recorded everything. The medical journal I was building was immaculate. No one could say I wasn't helping. No one could say I wasn't professional. The house became quieter. The clock ticked louder. The smell of boiled vegetables hung in the air like grief. Clara lost another 4 pounds. I congratulated her. She didn't smile. One night she asked if I believed in forgiveness. I said I believed in accountability. Then I asked if she wanted lemon water. She nodded. Her eyes were glassy. I brought it in a cup she used to give me when I was sick, the one with flowers. I watched her drink it slowly, both hands wrapped around the ceramic like it was the only warm thing she had left. I said we should revisit her goals. She asked if she had a choice. I said of course. She said she was tired. I said we all were. She asked if Mia knew. I said Mia only knew what I chose to share. She didn't speak after that. I left the room and updated her chart. Patient exhibits withdrawal, possible depressive symptoms. Recommend continued monitoring. She didn't argue anymore. She followed instructions. She said thank you when I handed her dinner. She said goodnight like a person apologizing for still being alive. I watched her move through the house like a shadow I'd finally caught. I told myself this was justice. I told myself this was balance. I told myself I was nothing like her. And when I lay in bed that night, I repeated those words like a prayer. It happened on a Thursday morning. Clara collapsed in the kitchen while reaching for the kettle. I heard the crash from upstairs and found her on the floor, clutching her ribs, eyes wide with confusion. I checked her vitals, noted the hypotension, and called emergency services. When the paramedics arrived, I handed them her chart, highlighted with recent weight loss, fatigue, reduced caloric intake, all meticulously documented. I explained her history of heart complications and how she had been non-compliant with her meal plan. I spoke with measured concern. They nodded, took notes, asked if I could ride along. At the hospital, I stayed by her side as they inserted IV fluids, monitored her blood pressure, and drew blood. I gave the attending physician a summary of her treatment complete with lab results and dietary logs. He asked if I was a relative. I said I was her caregiver. He said I was thorough. Clara tried to speak, but her words slurred. She reached for my hand, maybe in fear, maybe in plea, but I didn't take it. I stepped aside as they wheeled her to imaging. Mia arrived an hour later, frantic and pale. I met her in the waiting area and handed her the printed reports. She read through them quickly, her fingers trembling. She asked why her mother was so malnourished. I said it was a combination of heart failure and resistance to dietary structure. Mia looked at me unsure. I added that we had done everything we could. I didn't mention the daily reductions, the withheld supplements, the emotional attrition. She hugged me and said thank you for being there. Clara was admitted overnight. Her blood work revealed severe nutrient deficiencies, borderline anemia, dangerously low electrolytes. The doctors questioned the aggressiveness of her diet. I defended it. I quoted sources, cited protocols, pointed to compliance goals. They accepted my reasoning. I was credentialed after all. She stayed 3 days. I stayed 1. On the second night, I went home, sat in her armchair, and opened the drawer she always kept locked. Inside were pages torn from my old notebooks, drawings, meal logs, the coded entries I thought I'd hidden. She had found them. She had saved them. I didn't know whether to be furious or moved. I felt both. I brought the papers with me the next morning and left them on the windowsill by her bed. She looked at them, then at me. Her lips parted, but no words came. I said nothing. Mia walked in 10 minutes later. I excused myself. That afternoon, my father called. He'd cut his trip short flown in that morning. He asked what had happened. I told him the clinical summary. He asked if I thought it was preventable. I said with earlier compliance, perhaps. He didn't respond. That evening he visited the house. He asked to see her treatment plan. I showed him. He asked to see my documentation. I gave him everything. He sat at the kitchen table reading page after page while I made tea. He looked tired, older. He asked me if I had punished Clara. I asked him if he thought I had reason to. He said that wasn't an answer. I said it was the only one I had. Mia came the next day with an envelope. Inside were old photographs me at 10, 11, 12 standing at a birthday table with no cake, watching Mia blow out candles. I didn't know these photos existed. She said she'd found them in Clara's dresser buried under old bills. I asked why she brought them. She said she wanted me to see that she remembered, that she hadn't forgotten everything, that maybe it wasn't all one person's fault. I didn't know what to say. Clara was discharged with strict follow-up instructions. Mia volunteered to care for her. My father agreed. They said I needed rest. I said I understood. I moved out 2 days later, left the kitchen as I had found it immaculate, silent, cold. My father hugged me. Mia said thank you. Clara didn't speak. She just watched from the window as I pulled away. Weeks passed. I received a letter from the medical board. A formal inquiry had been opened. Someone, likely a nurse at the hospital, had raised concerns about my care practices. I prepared a response. Clinical, professional, distant. I defended my methods, cited results pointed to documentation. They asked for an in-person hearing. I attended. I wore gray, answered every question, kept my voice calm. They said the investigation would take months. I said I understood. I returned to my apartment and stood in the kitchen for a long time staring at the refrigerator. I thought of all the times I'd opened it as a child and found nothing. Now it was full. But I wasn't hungry. I sat at the table and read through Clara's old logs again, the notes she made about my behavior, my weight, my food. I saw a pattern I hadn't noticed before. Not just cruelty, but obsession. Control as a form of fear. She hadn't just wanted to shape me. She had wanted to stop time, to preserve something. I didn't forgive her, but I understood her better than I ever had. 5 months later, I received word that my license had been suspended pending a final decision. I was no longer allowed to practice. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. I read it twice, closed my laptop, and made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink. I stared out the window at the bare trees lining the street. Winter was coming early that year. Clara had been moved to an assisted living facility near the edge of town. Mia visited once a week, my father less so. I didn't visit at all. But I knew. I knew she sat alone in the common room, refusing to eat unless meals were measured precisely. I knew she weighed her slippers before putting them on. I knew the staff called her delicate. I knew her new nutritionist used the words balanced and patient and recovery. I wondered what Clara told them when they asked about her daughter-in-law. I wondered if she mentioned the way I used to smile while placing her dinner down. I wondered if she ever told them about the girl who once counted grapes in the dark and imagined the taste of breakfast. I didn't reach out. Not to Clara, not to Mia, not to my father. I applied for work under a different title. Consultant, advisor, educational speaker. I spoke at conferences about childhood trauma and its impact on eating behavior. I never used my name in the examples, but the audience always listened carefully when I described how restriction becomes ritual, how hunger can be inherited like eye color. One woman approached me after a talk and said my words had helped her understand her own daughter. I thanked her and said nothing more. At home, I kept a notebook where I tracked my own meals. Not for weight, not for discipline, just to know. Some nights I skipped dinner. Some mornings I ate toast at midnight. I told myself it wasn't about punishment, it was just memory. I dreamed of Clara sometimes, not angry, not bitter, just quiet. She would be sitting at the table, her hands folded, waiting for something I hadn't brought. I always woke up before I knew what it was. In my kitchen, I removed the locks. I threw away the scale. I left the pantry door open. I tried to stop counting. Some days it worked. Most days it didn't. Once while shopping for groceries, I saw a child begging her mother for cookies. The mother said no, not tonight. The child cried. I froze in the cereal aisle, unable to move. I watched the child walk away, her hands empty. I bought the cookies. I didn't eat them. I left them in the park near the swing set unopened. I told myself it was a gesture, a kind of offering, to the child I had been, to the hunger that never really left. They say cycles are hard to break. They say hurt people hurt people. They say healing is possible. I don't know what's true. I only know what remains. In my apartment, the meals are small. The silence is larger. I light a candle each evening and sit at the table alone. Sometimes I imagine Clara sitting across from me. Sometimes I imagine myself at 9 years old. I tell her we survived. I tell her it's over. I tell her nothing else will be taken. She nods but doesn't speak. She looks at me with my own eyes. We sit there together in the quiet, and outside the world keeps turning.